Mankind's first true encounter with global warfare comes with World War I, but it is by no means the last. What follows is a century characterized by violence, mistrust, and injustice. The Paris Peace Conference is held at the end of the war on January 18, 1919, by the 5 victorious allies: the United States, Britain, France, Italy, and Japan. The Allies reassign national boundaries and draw up the Treaty of Versailles and various other treaties, imposing considerable war reparations upon Germany. The Germans find themselves humiliated as rising debt and the economic impact of the Great Depression leave their country in a state of hyperinflation, poverty, and mass unemployment. As national despair increases, the doors open wide to invite in a new government. Fueled by bleak economic conditions and an increasing nationalistic fervor, the Nazi Party quickly rises to power throughout Germany. Using his charisma to appeal to the masses, party leader Adolf Hitler soon establishes a dictatorship and withdraws Germany from the League of Nations. International tension prevails in mainland Europe as Nazi-ruled Germany begins ignoring key demilitarization clauses of the 1919 treaties. Finally, the Germans invade Poland on September 1st, 1939, marking the beginning of World War II. The German forces advance through Poland with their blitzkrieg tactics and soon gain control of the entire country by the end of September. Within the next year, Hitler's troops seize the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, and France. Meanwhile, Italy and Japan begin their own military campaigns and form a pact with Nazi Germany. Together, their combined forces were known as the Axis. The ambitions of the Axis seemed to be limitless. In June of 1940, Italy begins advancing into North Africa, fighting against British forces. Not long after that, the Germans begin a risky but ultimately unsuccessful invasion into the heart of the Soviet Union. And within the year, Japan launches a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, prompting the United States to finally enter the war on the side of the Allies. And now, in 1942, the Axis powers continue to grow in strength and number as the rest of the world trembles in fear.
According to the latest SIS report, Rommel and the Afrika Korps are planning a surprise attack. Behind these rocks is their dispatch unit. Our objective is to get in there and steal those battle plans. It's going to be a dangerous mission, so take cover out there and don't get yourselves killed. Right. Maya, Baxter, and Clark on the left flank. Take out those machine guns and cover their escape route. We can't let them leave. Lancelot, Frost, and Kyle, you'll all be with me. We'll take the right flank. Get your grenades ready, men. Take them down in one quick strike. Now, make sure you spread out and don't give them an easy target. We need to move at the same time, So everyone wait for my count. Ready? 3, 2, 1, attack! Incoming!
Lieutenant! Lieutenant, you all right? Sergeant, the lieutenant's down!
Lieutenant! Damn it, he's not gonna make it!
Hold on, sir. We're going to get you some help.
It's too late, he's dead. And so are we if we don't get out of here. Come on, let's go. You mother!
Those rocks! It's only a matter of time before they see us. Jude, do you have any grenades?
No, I'm all out, mate.
Well, then I guess we're done for.
Damn that intel unit. Think they could have mentioned they had a bloody tank? What now? It's aiming straight for us. Run!
What the hell just happened?
Reinforcements!
I can't believe we survived.
Lay me.
Hey, you all right? Talk to me! Come on!
Jude, help me. Jude!
It's not that bad, mate. You'll be fine. You got that? Damn it. He's going to die if I can't stop this bleeding.
Major James Gallant, British Special Forces. What happened?
He was shot by a bloody Nazi. Our platoon's wiped out. There's no one left to tend to him, sir.
Jude, what's going on? I don't want to die. Don't let me die.
Please, Major, we don't have much time. I'm begging you. You have to help him. Don't let him die.
I'll see what I can do. Hey, Frank, pass me that field kit. What's his blood type?
It's A, sir.
Good. So am I. That'll make this a lot easier. Keith, grab the blood transfusion kit.
Major, I don't know. Awfully risky.
Jim, he's right.
We have no choice. The Allies need as many healthy bodies as they can get out on the battlefield. We can't let him die.
I understand, but...
In the event his body rejects the transfusion, I'll take responsibility.
Yes, Major.
All right, let's get started. Frank, stop the bleeding. You two, hold his body down. Now, this is going to sting a bit, lad, but it'll save your life.
Major! Dad? Mum? Alicia?
Well, look who's finally awake. All right then, mate.
Jude, where am I?
You're in a hospital in Cairo. You've been here ever since you went down on the battlefield.
I remember getting hit, but after that, how long have I been out?
5 days.
It's only been 5 days? How did I recover so quickly? Who brought me here anyway?
You remember those lads who saved us? Well, they helped me carry you to the first aid tent before they went back to the front line.
I see. He saved me. Gallant. Major Gallant of the British Special Forces. That's odd. I wasn't aware a squadron like that existed. Maybe it's some sort of covert operations unit. But what would they be doing out here?
You should count your lucky stars, mate. Even the doctor was amazed at how quickly you recovered from your injury.
Really?
Yeah, he said the gunshot wound you suffered's starting to close up, and something like that usually takes 3 weeks to heal.
That's good to hear. I must have had one hell of a surgeon.
Right, well, you haven't fully recovered yet, so take it easy and get some rest. I'll be back tomorrow morning to see how you're doing.
Didn't know I was so healthy. I thought I was a goner out there.
I received word from Cordelia that the soldier we saved didn't suffer any adverse reactions from the transfusion.
It's great, but he isn't out of the woods just yet.
I understand your apprehension, Keith, but he's going to be fine. His situation is no different than Lewis and Cynthia's.
Well, we'll just have to wait until the period to find out. But either way, I think we should place those two under our supervision, Jim.
I agree. In fact, I've already contacted Colonel Starling and requested an immediate transfer. They should be receiving their PCS orders in a couple of weeks. He won't show any immediate signs, but eventually his body will begin to change, so we'll need to inform him of what he can expect. Keith, take Cordelia with you and provide the lads an escort.
Will do, Major.
It's been 2 weeks since I was injured on the battlefield. I've since been released from hospital, and I'm now returning to SAS Regimental Headquarters. Headquarters is normally located in Hereford, about 3 hours by train from London. However, the entire SAS unit is currently stationed here in North Africa, so HQ has been temporarily relocated to Cairo. Upon arriving at headquarters, I'm immediately ordered to report to Colonel Starling, my commanding officer. Jude and I wait for him in his office. I can't understand why the Colonel would want to meet with a squaddy like me. In fact, I'm surprised he even remembered me. Maybe he's decided there's no point in keeping me around, since I got injured in my first taste of battle. Maybe he's going to send me home.
At ease, gentlemen.
Yes, sir.
As you know, we've had SAS units here in North Africa since the start of the war. We beat those Italians pretty bad, but when the Germans began sending reinforcements, we lost some ground. The situation here has been turning in our favor over the past few weeks, though. General Montgomery's operations have been largely successful, and I think we may push them back yet. You should be pleased to know that thanks to you and your unit's efforts, we've acquired advanced information on Rommel's counter-attack, although it came at a great cost. Your platoon suffered heavy losses, and I understand you yourself were near death when Major Gallant found you.
Yes, sir.
Now that you've been released from hospital, you would normally be returning to your unit. However, I received a special request from Major Gallant, and so as of today, the two of you have been reassigned to K Company.
Sir?
This is Lieutenant Miller and Lance Corporal Blake, K Company, 1st Platoon. They're here to escort you to your new unit.
Good day, man. I'm Lieutenant Keith Miller.
And I'm Lance Corporal Cordelia Blake.
As Colonel Starling has just explained, we'll both be joining K Company, 1st Platoon.
A demotion? With all due respect, Lieutenant, why are we being removed from A Company?
Oi, so what kind of unit do you think we are, Corporal?
My apologies, sir. I meant no disrespect. Just worried about joining a unit that has a woman in it. I still want to fight on the front lines.
You listen here. Cordelia is an excellent soldier, and I would entrust her with my life on the battlefield.
Easy, Lieutenant. Now, you lads don't know this, but K Company is part of our Special Forces. It's independent of our main unit, although it performs similar operations. Occasionally, though, K Company is assigned special missions on direct orders from the Prime Minister, such as the infiltration of enemy-held territories.
So then, we'll be reporting directly to Prime Minister Churchill?
That is correct. And for that reason, K Company's missions are demanding and greatly important. They require a team that consists of the most capable personnel. I don't know why James selected 2 green recruits such as yourselves. However, I expect you to live up to the reputation of the unit. Good luck, gentlemen.
Yes, sir! We'll do our best to honor the SAS motto, "Who dares wins!"
That's what I like to hear. All right, Lieutenant, they're all yours. See that they get to K Company safely. Oh, and please tell James to drop by for a drink sometime.
Yes, sir. Okay, you two, let's go.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Well, lads, any questions we can answer for you?
Can you tell us where you're taking us?
To Tobruk.
Tobruk? But I thought that was under enemy control.
It is. As Colonel Starling said, many of our missions entail infiltrating enemy territory. So during your first couple of months with the unit, you'll be trained in all matters of covert operations. Once you're finished with your training, you'll join the rest of K Company, 1st Platoon, or the Wolf Pack, as we like to be called. We're currently laying the groundwork for a counter-offensive.
An infiltration operation in the middle of enemy territory. How in the world did we get chosen for this?
That's a good question. You should ask our commanding officer.
Major Gallant?
Yes. Oh, and I should mention, he's been promoted to Lieutenant Colonel.
Duly noted, sir.
4 months pass since Corporals Kyle and Lancelot joined the Wolf Pack after their initial encounter in western Egypt, and the Allied forces have begun implementing a plan to reclaim North Africa. October 23rd marks the beginning of Britain's Operation Lightfoot. The campaign opens with the infantry of the 30th Corps breaking through Axis lines and clearing a route through the enemy's minefields. 5 miles long and wide enough for the 10th Armored Division's tanks to pass through. While Erwin Rommel, commander of the Afrika Korps, seeks medical treatment in Germany, his replacement, Georg Stumme, dies unexpectedly of a heart attack on October 24th. The Allies attempt to take advantage of this fortuitous turn of events and continue their attacks despite resistance from the German 15th Panzer Division. As the fighting continues, British General Bernard Montgomery launches the next phase of the plan, Operation Supercharge, on the morning of November 2nd. Despite the Germans' strong attempts at a counterattack, Montgomery's efforts prove successful, and the Allies are able to break through the Axis lines. Rommel returns to North Africa, but it is too late for him to repel the Allied assault. With the loss of 400 vehicles, he orders his men to withdraw to Tunisia. On the 8th of November, the Allies implement Operation Torch and land behind the Afrika Korps, cutting off their escape route. Meanwhile, the Wolf Pack, including its 2 newest members, is called to duty on an important mission.
All right, listen up, everyone. We've been authorized to strike. Tomorrow morning, we'll infiltrate the German headquarters located outside Tobruk. Our mission is to capture and detain a prominent German individual.
Who is it, sir?
A physicist named Werner Futtner.
What's a German physicist doing on the front lines?
According to SIS, Futtner came to North Africa to visit his old friend Rommel, but he ran into our counteroffensive and has been left stranded outside Tobruk.
And what's so important about this Futtner that we'd run the risk of infiltrating enemy territory to capture him?
Futtner is reportedly involved with Germany's weapons program. We need to acquire as much information from him as possible about the new weapon he's working on.
And what kind of weapon would that be?
A new type of bomb that, if fully developed, would have the power to wipe out an entire city.
An entire city? Is that even possible?
It appears so, which is all the more reason we cannot fail this mission. We must do whatever it takes to capture Futtner and learn what we can about this bomb. Is that understood?
Yes, sir.
Good. Now we'll be traveling by land. The operation will commence tomorrow morning at 0600. Pack your equipment and be back here in 15 minutes for briefing.
All right. We're finally going back to the front. I can't wait to get another piece of those damn Jerrys.
Yeah, it's about time, mate. Let's make them pay for London.
Hey, if you tickets are done chatting, then I suggest you get your gear packed. If you're not ready on time, we'll leave you both behind.
Yes, sir.
This is the village we'll be attacking. There's a German unit stationed here to look after Futtner. We'll enter from the south and make our way to the building where he's residing. They'll be outfitted with tanks and armored vehicles, so be careful. And remember, we need Futtner alive. Do not destroy the building he's in. Okay, back to your posts, everyone. Is everyone ready? All right, let's move out.
Take down the tanks and the armored vehicles first. Aim for their sides.
Stop charging ahead. In this unit, we cover each other's backs and advance with caution.
Take this!
What is the meaning of this? Who are you people?
Lieutenant Colonel Gallant, British Special Forces. Professor, we'd like you to share some information with us about the bomb you're developing for the Nazis.
And what makes you think I'd share this information with you?
I think my lieutenant here might be able to persuade you. Keith?
Shooting an unarmed man, huh? I'm sorry. Your threats will not change my mind.
And unfortunately, I have no choice.
Fine. I'll tell you what you want to know, but only if I have your assurance that my life will be spared. And, I want your word that my family and I can take refuge in Britain. If the Nazis were to find out about this, they would kill us all.
Agreed. I'll advise the necessary authorities and personally guarantee the safety of you and your family. We'll make arrangements for safe passage and political asylum immediately. I can put it in writing if you'd like.
That will not be necessary, Lieutenant Colonel. I've heard much about British honor, and will take you at your word.
Thank you, Professor. Keith, lower your weapon.
Very well. Let me explain about the weapon we're producing. Are you familiar with the process of nuclear fission?
Yes, it's a phenomenon that occurs when an element such as uranium absorbs neutrons and splits into smaller nuclei.
Very good. In the 1930s, Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann discovered that splitting an atom releases neutrons and energy. A few 100 million electron volts of energy to be exact. This can cause another nucleus to split and release more neutrons and more energy, inducing a chain reaction. In other words, once the chain reaction begins, it produces an immense amount of energy, all within the blink of an eye.
I see. And with a big enough chain reaction, you can destroy an entire region almost instantly.
Precisely. My, your soldiers catch on fast. We were applying this process to make the most powerful weapon man has ever seen, the atomic bomb.
The atomic bomb?
It's an absolute secret, but we've been researching these bombs at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute and the Max Planck Institute, both at Berlin. Hitler calls it the Copenhagen Project, and we've been under strict military supervision. We developed a prototype of the bomb at a top-secret plant in Czechoslovakia last April, and the experiments we ran on it were quite successful.
So, is the bomb ready for deployment?
Oh no, not for a few more months. We're getting much closer, but the bomb is not yet ready for practical use. But I'm having reservations. A bomb of this magnitude, it could destroy a whole city. It could kill tens of thousands of people. It sends chills up my spine. But if we do not create this bomb, the fatherland will not survive this war. I don't know what to do. I traveled here to seek the advice of an old friend. I thought he might be able to help me decide what's best.
You're referring to Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox.
Yes. Yes, that's correct. I'm impressed. Your intelligence network is exceptional.
Professor, I thank you for sharing this information with us. We'll escort you to our headquarters in Cairo, where our agents will have more questions for you.
Lieutenant Colonel, what should a man do when faced with these choices? I'm no murderer, but I vowed to serve my country.
Sometimes we don't know if we're making the right decision until we look back on it in hindsight. I can tell you, however, that by cooperating with us, you may be saving thousands of lives.
We can only hope.
With the success of the North African campaign, the British 8th Division is able to seize Tobruk on November 13, 1943. By January 23rd, they control Tripoli in Libya. The Afrika Korps manages to retreat to Tunisia and reorganize a defensive line at Mareth, but they are unable to slow the Allied advance. It is only a matter of time before the German forces are completely driven out of Africa. After joining the resistance efforts in Africa for a few weeks, the Wolfpack are ordered to return to Britain in February to receive new orders. Their next objective is Germany's northernmost research center, the Rjukan deuterium plant in Norway. The destruction of this facility has been deemed imperative to halting Germany's production of an atomic bomb.
Two more hours until the assault.
I'm so cold.
If we stay out here like this, we're going to freeze to death.
Here, I brought you all some tea. This should help warm you up a bit.
Cheers, mate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mind if I sit next to you?
No. Not at all.
So have you two gotten used to the unit by now? I know you lot aren't accustomed to seeing women on the front lines.
I was a bit surprised at first, I'll confess. But now that I've seen you two in combat, I guess there's nothing wrong with it.
If we weren't with the Lieutenant Colonel, they'd probably have us in the back doing logistics or some nonsense. That's the army for you.
Yeah, so when did you join the Wolfpack?
A couple of years back. I'd been wounded kinda like you there. When Gallant saved me, he transferred me in. Before all this, I was a sniper in the Signal Corps.
Injured and rescued by the Lieutenant Colonel. What a coincidence. So then, you've always been a sniper?
Yeah, ever since me father used to take me hunting. I guess shooting was my only real talent as a kid. But shooting actual people, somehow that's still new to me.
Even if they're German soldiers who've killed innocent civilians?
Now, it's a right shame you feel that way. German soldiers are human beings too, you know. Each one of them is someone's father, brother, or son.
Human beings don't drop bombs on civilians. Those damn Krauts can all go to hell for all I care.
Oh, don't kid yourself. We're guilty of bombing and killing innocent civilians too. That's just the ugly reality of war. It's humanity at its worst.
That's quite a cynical outlook you have there, Cynthia.
Cynical, eh? When I was growing up in Ireland, I watched the British and the IRA fighting almost every day, before my very eyes. You cozy Londoners wouldn't understand.
I'm sorry, I didn't know.
Oh, that's all right, fella. I got a little carried away there. No worries.
So why do you two hate Germans so much?
Oh, well, I guess we all have our own reasons.
Yeah.
Quit messing around, you two. Stay on alert for the signal to attack. Ladies, it goes for you too.
Sorry, sir.
You should know. The lads got their reasons for hating the Germans. Both of them lost their parents in the Blitz. And Jude also lost his younger sister. As for the other one, well, Jude's sister was his sweetheart.
Oh, I see. Reminds me of me younger days.
They'll come off it eventually, but just let them alone until then. Maybe even give them some sympathy? If it's not too much to ask.
Hey now, what do you take us for? Of course we'll show them some sympathy.
Hey, do you two think they'll eventually hate me as well?
Don't you worry none. If they even look at you funny, I'll sort them right out. And, Lieutenant, we'll start with that sympathy straight away, sir.
Our mission is to destroy the enemy's deuterium plant, where they have been conducting nuclear testing. The road up ahead is the only access route to or from the facility. We will be moving alongside the road in the hills. Once we've engaged the enemy, we'll have to be quick about eliminating the guards and securing the area. The enemy has stationed a squadron of soldiers to guard the facility, so proceed with extreme caution. Good luck, team.
Protect us, Lord.
We've taken control of the plant, sir.
Good. Let's enter the interior of the facility and place the... Wait a second.
What the hell are those things? Interesting. I wasn't aware the Germans possessed the technology to reanimate corpses. They must have discovered a way to control the souls of the dead.
Control the souls of the dead? That's ridiculous.
On the contrary, it's really not that uncommon at all. In the old days, they called it black magic. You see, the process of full resurrection requires many souls to perform, but restoring a dead body to life just temporarily really isn't that complicated. The physics behind it are quite rational, I assure you. It's just that it's all rather, well, inhumane. You're off your rocker, mate.
That will be enough, Private East.
Yes, sir. My apologies, Lieutenant Colonel.
Here they come!
Bye.
All right, place the explosives. Set the timer for each fuse at 6 minutes, and stay alert, everyone.
It seems they've begun to appear again. How do you want to handle them?
Their involvement will change the entire complexion of the war. We're going to need Jack and the Professor.
The Professor I can understand, but Jack? I'm not so sure, Jim. You're taking quite a risk.
I agree. We'll have to place a restraining device on him, and if worst comes to worst, we'll just have to take care of him ourselves.
I'm afraid this is going to turn out like that incident in the East End.
You shouldn't worry so much, Frank.
The explosives have been set, sir. Detonation in 5 minutes and counting.
All right, everyone, let's move out. Head for the meeting point.
you